Welcome back to the channel. In today's story, we examine how years of ignored fire safety violations, improper use of pyrotechnics, and a series of corruption, combined with the ceiling decorated with dry twigs, turned a crowded nightclub into a deadly environment. This is the story of the Lame Horse Nightclub fire, the deadliest nightclub disaster in Russian history. On December 5, 2009, a popular nightclub known as Lame Horse Nightclub, located in the city of Perm, Russia, was celebrating its 8th anniversary. The event that night was exclusive, open only to invited guests. Most of those invited were friends and family of the owners, employees of the club, and people connected to its inner circle, giving the celebration a private, almost informal feel. Unlike many modern nightclubs of the time, the Lame Horse offered a very different atmosphere. It was designed to feel cozy and compact, with smaller dance floor that aimed to create a more intimate and immersive experience rather than a large open party space. The club leaned heavily into its aesthetic, favoring mood and decoration over practicality. The building itself was not originally designed to operate as a nightclub. Its layout reflected that, especially the unusually low ceiling, a common feature in Soviet-era structures. At first glance, the ceiling height may have seemed like a minor detail, but as the night unfolded, it would play a critical and tragic role in what was about to happen. On the night of December 5th, the Lame Horse Nightclub opened its doors to its invited guests. Close to 300 people had shown up to the private event. Everyone was excited to attend the celebration as it marked the nightclub's anniversary and was considered a special occasion. Many of the guests knew one another personally, which added to the relaxed and festive atmosphere inside the club. That night was also extremely cold, with temperatures hovering around minus 16 degrees Celsius or about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of the freezing conditions outside, guests rushed indoors as quickly as possible, eager to escape the cold. The weather made the idea of stepping back outside unappealing, keeping nearly everyone packed tightly inside the venue. The night started out well, with guests enjoying the club's music and entertainment. The interior was decorated extensively for the event, with a strong focus on atmosphere and appearance. Many of the decorations were made from flammable materials. One of the most notable features was the ceiling, which had been covered with dried willow twigs to give the nightclub a rustic, natural look. These twigs were completely dry and untreated, making them highly combustible. It wasn't just the decorations that the club invested in. Dance performers had been hired to entertain the guests throughout the night, along with master of ceremonies whose role was to keep the crowd engaged and energized. The club owners did not spare any expense for the 8th anniversary celebration. Video recorded by one of the guests show a crowded dance floor, flashing lights, and people enjoying themselves. Everything appeared normal, and the event continued like this for several hours. At around 1 a.m., at the height of the celebration, the master of ceremonies called guests toward the center of the dance floor and began asking them questions. The crowd's attention was focused forward, watching the interaction. The atmosphere remained upbeat. There was no immediate indication that anything was wrong. Then, at some point, one of the performers hired by the club activated a pyrotechnic device just behind the dance floor. The sparks from the pyrotechnic device ignited the dry willow twigs almost instantly. The pyrotechnic device being used was a cold flame type, which produces a fountain of sparks without a sustained open flame. These devices are commonly used at concerts and indoor events. Despite the name, the sparks they emit can reach temperatures between 200 and 300 degrees Celsius at the point of emission. In larger venues with higher ceilings, this usually does not pose a serious risk. Inside the Lame Horse Nightclub, however, the ceiling was extremely low. Combined with the dry, flammable twigs, this created a dangerous situation. The sparks traveled only a short distance before making direct contact with the ceiling. Several guests later stated that the fire spread so quickly that there was almost no visible transition from sparks to full flames. The MC began telling guests that a fire had started and that everyone needed to evacuate. Within seconds, the willow twigs burst into flames. Thick smoke began to spread across the ceiling and descend rapidly, People near the back of the club initially had no idea that a fire had started and only realized something was wrong when the smoke reached them. The Lame Horse Nightclub had two exits, the main entrance and a rear exit located behind the stage through the kitchen. Unfortunately, there were no illuminated signs indicating the presence of a rear exit, and the stage itself partially blocked access to it. As a result, most guests were unaware that a second exit even existed. Only a small number of staff and regular patrons knew where it was and were able to use it. The majority of the guests rushed toward the main entrance. Although it was a double-leaf door, only the left side door was unlocked. The right side door remained locked, creating a severe bottleneck. As smoke thickened behind them, people began pushing forward. Some were knocked to the ground and quickly trapped beneath others, causing a crush near the doorway. The rear exit created a different and equally dangerous problem. When the door was opened, freezing outside air rushed into the club, creating a strong draft. This sudden influx of oxygen caused the fire to intensify rapidly. Flames spread quickly along the ceiling toward the main entrance. Witnesses later described the fire moving so fast that it appeared to roll across the room. Because of the low ceiling, there was almost no buffer between the fire and the people below. Smoke and flames reached head level almost immediately. Visibility dropped to zero. Many guests became disoriented, unable to see exits or recognize familiar surroundings. Some collapsed within seconds from smoke inhalation, while others suffered burns to their heads, arms, and upper bodies. Like many Soviet-era buildings, the club did not have a sprinkler system. There was nothing in place to slow the spread of the fire or reduce the smoke. As panic increased, guests attempted to help one another. Some dragged unconscious people toward the exit, while others tried to shield friends and family as they moved through the smoke. Many guests escaped without their jackets, shoes, or personal belongings. Outside, they were met with freezing temperatures. Injured and unconscious people were laid on the snow-covered ground. Some guests poured water over burns despite the extreme cold, while others tried to keep victims warm using whatever clothing they could find. The majority of serious injured occurred in the narrow corridor leading to the main entrance and directly at the doorway itself, where the crowd had become tightly compressed and escape was nearly impossible. An ambulance arrived at the scene roughly 20 minutes after the fire began, but there were still no firefighters present. According to one witness, for nearly the first 20 minutes, there were no fire trucks or coordinated emergency services at the nightclub. Only 2 ambulances arrived initially, and they were able to take just 6 or 7 victims before immediately leaving for nearby hospitals. Outside the club, dozens of people lay injured on the ground in freezing temperatures. Many were unconscious, badly burned, or suffering from severe smoke inhalation. Witnesses later stated that some victims remained outside without medical assistance for close to an hour. One witness believed that several people may have died from exposure to the cold after escaping the fire, though there is no official report confirming hypothermia as a direct cause of death. Another witness described seeing an ambulance park at the end of the street. When he approached and asked why they were not helping, the crew reportedly said they had not received orders to respond. This added to growing confusion and frustration at the scene. Firefighters eventually arrived, followed shortly by police. Fire crews began pulling people from the building and laying them on the ground outside. However, many of those rescued were left exposed to the cold with no immediate assessment of whether they were alive or dead. Several people at the scene criticized both firefighters and police for what they believed was a slow and poorly coordinated response. They also criticized the police for what they described as a lack of basic care, noting that no effort was made to shield injured victims from the freezing cold, even with available clothing. It became clear that emergency services were unprepared for a disaster of this scale. By the end of the tragedy, 156 people were confirmed dead. 94 died inside the club, while 62 later died in hospitals from their injuries. Many survivors suffered severe burns and long-term health complications. The last person to die as a direct result of the fire was Irina Pekarskaya. She lost the ability to speak and move due to her injuries and died 11 years later from complications related to the fire. From the moment the fire started until emergency crews finally arrived, the scene outside the club was chaotic and uncontrolled. Survivors, witnesses, and bystanders later questioned how many lives may have been saved if emergency services had arrived sooner and with clear coordination. But as public attention grew, authorities began shifting focus away from the response itself and toward the central question: why and how did the fire start in the first place? Investigators initially considered several possible causes. One theory focused on electrical faults, another even raised the possibility of a terrorist act, though this was quickly dismissed due to a lack of evidence. As more witness statements, video footage, and forensic evidence were reviewed, investigators concluded that the fire had been caused by the illegal use of indoor pyrotechnics. The investigation uncovered a long list of fire safety violations inside the club. Flammable ceiling decorations, blocked exits, the absence of sprinkler systems, and a complete lack of proper evacuation signage were all documented. Investigators also discovered that these violations had previously been approved through falsified inspections, pointing to bribery and corruption. The club's safety certificate had been obtained fraudulently, despite the venue being rated for a maximum occupancy of just 50 people, far below the nearly 300 present that night. A criminal case was opened on the grounds that fire safety violations had directly resulted in mass fatalities. In total, 9 individuals were charged and convicted in connection with the disaster. The club's co-owner was found guilty and sentenced to 9 years in prison, though he argued that he had nothing to do with the incident as he was just a passive investor and the club was managed by a different person. The executive director of the club received a 4-year sentence. 2 employees from the pyrotechnics company, a father and son, were also convicted. The father received 4 years, while the son, who allegedly ignited the device, was sentenced to 5 years. The club's art director, who had approved the interior design and tragically lost his wife in the fire, was sentenced to 6 years. The chief fire safety inspector received a 10-year sentence, though this was later reduced and replaced with a fine of 70,000 rubles, exactly $900 at the time. 2 additional fire inspectors who had approved the club despite multiple violations were sentenced to 4 and 5 years, and the club's commercial director received 6 years. In response to the fire, the Russian Fire Authority ordered sweeping inspections of nightclubs and entertainment venues across the country. In Moscow alone, more than 50 venues were found to be operating in serious breach of fire safety regulations. The Lame Horse Nightclub fire remains the deadliest nightclub disaster in Russian history.